Pitch me with Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC this week. Thought it would be a good time to ask the question that many are asking. Will Texas or Oklahoma be better in the SEC? And look, a ton of ways you can go with this. It's why it's kind of good for Pitch Me. It's obviously not something that has a very distinct answer as we sit here and talk about it, entering their first full school years in the conference. And I left it open ended because even though this is a football show, I'm interested in kind of all the different arguments for it. And if somebody wants to make an argument related to non-football sports, I will certainly hear it out. But I mean, it could be anything. It could be fan culture. It could be future success. It could be what have you done for me lately? Whatever the best pitch is, I think there are a variety of ways in which you can make it. Will, when you see this discussion come up of who do you think is going to be better in the SEC, for me, it's hard not to go just look at what 2024 can hold. But do you have a lean with what you think the answer is long term?
I think that we're just at two different points in two different guys' coaching careers, right? Because Sark, I mean, that's the thing is we're not looking at all the other Sark stuff, right? Before this stop, it's the fact that he's kind of a veteran and that we've seen what's right in front of us. Now, who's to say that Brent Venables can't be that guy? I think is the thing, right? And we talked about that a little bit when we talked about his extension. I think posed for immediate success is going to be Texas for sure, just based on last year. But again, who won that game last year? So I think it's a really fair question. And basically, if you're a Texas fan, you're hoping that last year was not the peak of Sark's career, which to this point it's been. And if you're an Oklahoma fan, you're thinking, well, this certainly isn't the floor of Brent Venables' career because he's gotten better every year. So yeah, I think we're at a really interesting crossroads right now.
We are, and I think it's okay to judge them with a different set of expectations for this year, just in terms of football, because of what Texas did last year and because of what Oklahoma is still trying to be able to get back to. And look, I think that while Oklahoma definitely has bragging rights over Texas, because when you win that game, that matters for 364 days. It truly does. But at the same time, Oklahoma is coming off of 3 consecutive seasons in which it didn't go to a New Year's Six Bowl. And we're asking these questions about, all right, well, how is this, and this going to translate? What's it going to look like for a team that's got a regular season over under 7.5 wins as opposed to Texas? That is very much in the preseason national title discussion. These things can change. Maybe they will change, but it's interesting hearing the arguments from fans about which are more suited for it. Because if we had done this, Will, after 2020, 2021, maybe even this time last year, I think Oklahoma kind of takes it in a bit of a landslide. And it's a little bit more of a fair fight now after what Texas just did by getting to the college football playoff, at least in that final year of the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole bit about Texas being back, but they might actually be. That's the funny part, is that I've never believed it until kind of like now is the first time I've been open to considering. And of course, this is the time that matters the most of the last 20 years outside of like the Mac Brown years, because it's like, yeah, if you're Charlie Strong right now, you would be in big trouble. Like you would really be like it would be an embarrassment to the state of Texas. Whereas right now, it feels like NIL has changed them. I think that's a pretty fair thing. They're the ones who have benefited probably the most in terms of, okay, and we'll get into that. I'm not going to tip the hand too much, but yeah, it's very interesting for sure.
Lamborghinis per capita, it's definitely changed them.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah. Let's start with this one from Paul Rake. This is from Saturday Down South Instagram, by the way. You should go follow that right now. Paul Rake says, sure, Texas could easily turn into a dumpster fire, but do have some things going for them. 1, Sark is a top 3 coach in the league from the outset. 2, Texas has outstanding recruiting base in the Dallas-Fort Worth and Houston metro areas. 3, the quality of Texas high school football is as good as any state in the country. I feel like 2 and 3 are one of the same. That's okay. 4, Texas has one of the largest alumni bases in the country. 5, Texas should have superior access to resources than any other SEC program because Austin has multiple varieties of super rich people, tech moguls, big shot real estate developers, traditional oil barons. I would include the comedy scene as well. A lot of people in that area. I don't know that they went to Texas, but that's certainly an area in which Texas has a lot of money coming in and out. Look, I think these are really good points. I think the only thing that I would question is what does it look like if that's a little bit more relegated, and if we do try and get to a place where it's not so much about just strictly NIL and unlimited salary cap, and then there is a little bit more regulation to that. Does that neutralize a lot of the things that Texas has working in its favor? Some of those things it definitely does, but what's not changing, the Texas recruiting is still such a high floor raiser. It should be that's why the decade that Texas had was so dumbfounding. But that's also kind of why it's not a guarantee that Texas is just set now during the 2020s, is because you had that. You had those resources. It wasn't like those went away, but bad decision making, bad evaluation of talent, lack of development can still hurt you in these areas, and it hurt Texas, I thought, at a time when Oklahoma was thriving. So, look, I think this is a really good pitch, but there is definitely a little bit of pushback on, okay, then why haven't you always been this? Why did it just take until 2023?
Yeah, this is about as many words as a pitch can be without me being furious at something. So credit to them for, I mean, to your point, the recruiting base is in high school football is kind of the same, but I do get the differentiation between, like, basically one of them is at every level, like 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A. It's all really, really competitive, and they're great players that come out of there. So I get that. I think that Texas is always at talent, right? Now, we could talk about, how they've done in the draft and all that, but they've always done great in recruiting. I think it's just about leadership, right? Which half of that, or 60% of that never really gets talked about is, Mac Brown did a great job with those Texas boosters. And we saw kind of during 2020 with the Eyes of Texas and all that, like, they have a booster group that really likes to be involved in Texas football, and they've run into the ground before kind of the last couple of years. So I think that when you have that leadership that weirdly Steve Sarkisian of all people is providing, it really does matter. I think now that this kind of, not a new generation because boosters are pretty old, right? But this modern generation of boosters have gotten a taste of winning. It's just like Nick Saban in Alabama in a way, right? Because that was seen as a job that was unfixable because the boosters were all over the place and there was expectation. Well, now that you've quieted those people, suddenly, Bijan is a great player. We can go back and look through the rosters and these great guys that they've had over the years. You're going back like an Earl Thomas or something. Like every year they seem to have not just like a fun guy, but like they have dudes on this roster, and so I think it's converting that talent into production. They have a good X's and O's coach who can do that, and if things are if there's more regulations, I mean, number one, the cat's out of the bag. Number two, it's not going to stop them from cheating. It's Texas.
True. Yeah, there was. I mean, and it won't necessarily be cheating in that sense if you're coming over the top with NIL. Yeah, the Austin factor of having different varieties of revenue streams of different areas of wealth is probably a part of the sell for Texas. It's probably a sell for why they can not necessarily have to worry about Alabama coming in and poaching Sark. If he looks at all of his surroundings and says, yeah, this is good. I've navigated kind of what this is like with the boosters, which is very, very unique. People always talk about that, the similarities that Nick Saban dealt with at Alabama when he stepped in there and he pretty much had to look in that room and say, I'm running the show, not you guys, get out of my way. Difficult thing to navigate at Texas with that money. It doesn't always work in your favor. It can sometimes be a hindrance. I felt like it's been a hindrance at times, but leadership is everything. I agree with you there. So the first point that he made, Sark is a top 3 coach in the league from the outset. Probably agree with that more than I disagree. So that's a good pitch. That's a good start here. I'll
say really quick on the Austin tip too. One thing that's really underrated about Ohio State is how massive of a city Columbus is. And if you look at what Georgia has done in their proximity to Atlanta, and you look at what Texas can do going forward with Austin, those are truly limitless places, right? That's why Ohio State has always felt a little bit bigger than like Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor is a college town. Columbus is a city with an NHL team. You know what I'm saying? And they're all focused on Ohio State. Same deal with Austin. Austin's a little bit more of like a hippy dippy, like they're not locked into college football in that same way that Columbus is, but those are fair weather fans, and you can turn those people on your side. And that's why the ceiling of a place like Austin is just always going to be, especially in the NIL level, higher than a place like Tuscaloosa, outside of something with like Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa,
In some ways, yes. I do push back on that to a certain extent of like some of these places that are in unbelievable markets. It's like, all right, then why aren't they awesome all the time? It's the, USC and UCLA not being able to get people to their games because there's so many other things to be able to do in LA. You have the big market. Northwestern, same sort of deal with Chicago. And it's like, I don't really like looking into that as like, oh, this is why you should be good because of this town and because people would rather be in this town than that town. But I do think that Austin feels like a very unique place in the college football landscape. It does not feel like typical small town college type vibe. And it's got a lot more things working in its favor with the college part already kind of established in that it's very much an identity, like a big part of the town's identity itself. Okay. The Oklahoma pushback, we knew we were going to have that as well. That's part of this. B. Horton 9, who says, OU easily. Sark ain't it. So disregard everything we just said.
Okay, never mind.
Brent Venables ate we'll call it a poop sandwich, that our guy Horton says, to walk into, and has only secured 3 top 10 recruiting cycles in a row, is currently out recruiting Texas, despite them going to the championship last year, and had 10 wins in his second year as a head coach. He did better with worse in year 1 than Sark did year 1. He did better than Sark did in year 2. That's a good point. And he will do better in year 3 and on. People forget that OU just beat Texas. Injuries have been the downfall of OU the last 2 years. Fair point. Year 1 was Dylan Gabriel. Year 2. Yeah. I was trying to think of like other things DG could be. Yeah, Dylan Gabriel makes a lot more sense. Year 2, it was half of the defensive starters. Now Venables has the depth to be able to overcome injuries. OU has the much tougher schedule in year 1 in the SEC, so we'll see how they do. But if they can sneak into the 12 team and beat Texas 2 years in a row, that would be a very elite year for them. Outside of my belief that Sark is it, the rest of this pitch is really good in my opinion.
Yeah,
it is. There's something to be said for the point about, well, look what Venables did in year 1, and he still gets, I shouldn't say still gets to 6 wins. Like if you compare the year 1 that Venables had to Sark's year 1, it was better. The year 2, it's better. And then what's to say that year 3 won't be, just as good? Different, making it into the 14 playoff as opposed to the 12-team playoff. Oklahoma and the year 3 schedule that Brent Venables has is even tougher than what Texas had last year, despite the fact that they had to go to Tuscaloosa. This is going to be fascinating to watch if that trend continues, because the recruiting is such a big part of why Venables got this extension and the way that he has quickly been able to turn around the identity, even if the overall rankings don't reflect it. The point that you brought up about how those recruiting classes are built up and that they can go out and get the big time defensive linemen is different than what we have come to know during the Lincoln Riley era. And that is why Joe Castiglione was so willing to go out and make a move like that, and then made his thoughts very, very well known about Lincoln Riley not wanting to be at Oklahoma as it ushers in the SEC era, and taking a nice dig at him. This is going to be so pivotal for this discussion, though, because all of those points are really fair. And if you're telling me that Brent Venables can't be that guy, I would give you this pitch. I would say this is the argument, though. And if we're talking about what are the things that get you to that place, the place that Sark got to last year, yeah, you got to be really good schematically. You've got to have a guy at quarterback. Well, if Oklahoma has those things with Jackson Arnold, the guy that was also a 5-star coming up, and if you have that on the defensive side of the ball with a guy that schematically knows what he's doing, then that's kind of the recipe for success when you can recruit and actually do things in the portal as well. So this is a really, really good pitch. And for those that just kind of scoff at Oklahoma, I would give you a lot of the things that were said there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've never really thought about how these two teams currently are constructed with respect to one another. The thing that made me fall in love with college football is kind of like the Triwizard Tournament from Harry Potter, right? Where you have these different people.
Goblet of Fire. What up?
Yes, that's my favorite Harry Potter movie, because you imagine, you got the French Academy, you got the Russian Academy, they're pulling up and they have their way they dress and the way they talk. And Texas, and maybe you think about it, you have this guy, Steve Sarkisian's been seen as this kind of untapped potential. He's kind of like the OG Lane Kiffin, right? Where it's okay, you're at Washington, you're at USC, you're Alabama's OC or the Falcons. You're always you're a smart guy. Everyone can acknowledge you're a smart guy, but it's about your composure, your temper, all this stuff. Well, Texas is like, let's write the check, let's take a risk on this guy, right? It's paid off for them. Oklahoma is the exact opposite. And of course, it's a defensive guy. That is Oklahoma through and through. This is his first head coaching job. He has not had those reps to kind of, I hate to say mess up, but that's what Sark did, right? He has no tape on him versus like bad tape that Sark brought into this job as far as his head coaching resume. So yeah, these are the two most different coaches, honestly, in a rivalry. It's almost shades of like Saban and Gus, because it's like what Brent Venables represents is blue collar, hardworking, no glitz and glamour, no headlines, just put your head down, do your job. And Sark has always been a little bit of he's not a headline guy to the degree that Kiffin is, but he's more of like, he's going to go recruit Arch Manning. He's going to go bring in these guys, the receivers and stuff out of the transfer portal, and just to kind of make a splash. Lamborghinis, like Brent Venables would look out of place in a Lamborghini. And I think that's why it fits these two places so perfectly. Talk about Austin, big city, Texas money, Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma, college town, kind of like middle America. So yeah, I love these two pitches back to back, because it really shows why, both sides are really committed to their guy. And from that standpoint, yeah, you got to measure guys at their level, right? So what this is making me realize is that I think we should probably start measuring these two coaches against each other probably in 2025, as non-fun as that is, unless we really see something surprising out of Oklahoma, because Texas is just a year ahead in their progression. And once you get to where it's all about getting to where you can really open it up, like Brian Kelly is still kind of getting to the point where we can open it up because the defense has been so bad, and then build his own system. And now, Texas last year was able to open it up. They had their guy. They had their system. They had their coaches. They had Bo Davis. They had all this stuff. Now it looks like this will be the coming out party for Oklahoma. Now it'll be in the SEC, as they noted, with a hard schedule. So they're kind of locked in to where Texas is going to be a little bit ahead of them because they have all this stuff in place. But at the same time, this pitch right here is making me realize, wow, the recruiting is better. That's such a good point. We talk about the Lamborghinis. We talk about Sark's recruiting and Arch Manning and all that. But the real grit and grind recruiting, as we talk about, Brent Venables is doing that a little bit better. So when you can develop those guys over 2 and 3 years, now it starts to get scary. Now it starts to be an equalizer,
The poop sandwich that these coaches inherited, which again, my words, not his.
Yeah.
They're different for this element that needs to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
When Sark comes in after Tom Herman has actually kind of a decent season 2020, but I think Texas just kind of got to that place where they felt like they saw the ceiling with him and it wasn't at the level that they wanted it to be at. And so that made this desire to move on from him a little bit different. And I think with the situation that Sark inherits, that's post 2020 at a time before the transfer restrictions are kind of dropped. And that was not until he's about to start his first year with the one-time undergrad transfers. Whereas Oklahoma, with the transfers that they had to deal with post 2021, that's what that established and that known that, if you're an undergrad, you're going to be able to get into the portal one time. And then, post Lincoln Riley, like they had to deal with that. So I do think that is a different situation to inherit the one that Brent Venables had, just because of the timing of that rule. And while he had a really similar year one to the year one that Sark had, Sark didn't get to the bowl game, Venables did. We should probably take that into consideration more so, and at least acknowledge that, because I do think that's a different thing. And I keep bringing that up over and over again with these teams that have the 30-day window now of what that's like to just have teams pick apart your roster, and you can have a Caleb Downs that just leaves your team that would have never left the team 10 years ago. But that's just the way that this kind of all breaks down. So important to remember that as well. But those are two good pitches to start, and obviously very opposite ends of the spectrum. Well, let's go to this one from JD Dale, Oklahoma. No, it's just JD Dale. Just JD Dale. JD says Oklahoma,
period.
Right? Oklahoma, period. One double-digit season by Sark as a head coach, not just at Texas. They haven't done much in 15 years. Doubt they start now. The counterpoint is, what if they do? What if this is another playoff season? Then Texas is indeed back. That's what we have declared. If Sark reverts back to the guy that just can't do it with that talent, the guy that gets into his own way, and this is an 8-4 season with that schedule, the 180 that we're going to do on him is going to be significant. It will be. I don't anticipate that because I believe in this Texas team. I believe in the way that he has built it. And I will always say, like, while I would always push back on the preemptive crowning of Texas, if they were going to truly be back, this is what it would look like. Okay? This is it right here. With the way that they have built it up, with the way that they have recruited and now finally found that right X's and O's guy, this is kind of the model for them. It's always been the model. That's why they hired Tom Herman. This is what it was supposed to be. And so to say like, they haven't done much in 15 years, yes, very, very true. And Oklahoma has undoubtedly been the more successful program in winning as many Big 12 championships as they did during that stretch when Texas goes from in between the years 2009 and 2023 to not have won a Big 12 championship is wild. Okay. And Oklahoma
Natties, though.
Totally This is true. This is true. People forget that. As many 21st century national championships as one another. Uno. That's it. Okay.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I don't know how much those 15 years matter anymore. I don't. I think it's a different set of circumstances that we're talking about. And if you're telling me, oh, well, if they had done this in 2012, that would change this discussion. I don't think it does. So the doubt they start now, they just started. They just started. Yeah. Unless this was a total one-off. And this schedule will show us if Texas can handle the preseason pressure and navigate a very favorable schedule and get to the playoff and be in this national championship discussion. I don't think you can keep saying that anymore if you're an Oklahoma fan of doubt they start now. I think that would be kind of proving that wrong.
So this is a version of this pitch. So like if they made this pitch, but I'll give it a specific example that I feel like they should have. The Houston game for Texas. So we really have not seen this team. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. They went into Bryant-Denny, beat Nick Saban. I fully get it. I've been on that page. Like I get it. What I was going to say is, I always make this joke about like, even the worst SEC team, if you got to go play Arkansas, their stadium is full and they're throwing stuff at you. And if they played, Arkansas instead of Houston that week, they might have been in trouble. And so that's the only thing I would say about the one iota of like the grain of salt I would put with Texas is that Big Ten schedule does allow you to take your feet off the brakes.
Big 12. Big 12 schedule.
Yeah. Or sorry. Yeah. That was just two sentences that didn't make any sense back to back. Let me rewind that. That Big 12 schedule gives you a chance to like kind of rest on your laurels a little bit, where the SEC doesn't. And again, these two guys kind of very different schedules. So I'd be really frustrated if I was Oklahoma. But yeah, I think that even just having the trap game, right? Because when you lose a rivalry game, that's a rivalry game. There's really no there's no saying we didn't care about that. There's no saying like you cared about that. Don't pretend you didn't. It's a big deal. So that does give you a little bit of pause. That's the biggest kind of like, we'll wait and see, is that in their head-to-head, Oklahoma won. And there were moments for Texas, even against, like TCU in 2022, where it's like, you guys just can't move the football. Like, what's going on here? Because we've seen the clips of Sark, like when he was the OC at Alabama, and it was like dudes are just running wide open. We haven't seen that as often, I feel, at Texas. I don't exactly know why. Maybe that's being part of the bigger Saban system and having other coaches around you. But I would say the ability to separate yourself from the average teams and do what Georgia's done and consistently just smack those teams is pretty hard to do. So, yeah, I think the consistency is definitely a fair question for Texas. But to your point, they already prove the doubters wrong about like start now. You already started.
Texas beat Big 12 teams by an average of 17 points last year. That's what it's supposed to look like, man.
Yeah.
And I know you can make the case, they're playing a dogfight against Wyoming. You can find these examples with the elite teams where you can kind of nitpick, and not every single team is going to be out here 2019 LSU, where it's just you don't even have a chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter against them.
Right, but that's what Oklahoma looked like in the Big 12. That's what Oklahoma. They were not beating teams by 17. They were beating teams by 20. They were beating teams by 30. Like the Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, those Oklahoma teams were smoking teams in that conference.
Yeah, I think we saw Oklahoma's ceiling, or it felt like we did. And some would say, well, that was a Lincoln Riley thing. Well, we saw kind of at the end of the Stoops era as well. and it felt like we saw their ceiling of what it could be, and it's just stopped being the Oklahoma defense that could win a national championship, and that was obviously a hindrance. Whereas Texas, I think part of the intrigue is the feeling that you haven't seen the ceiling yet, in part because we haven't seen Sark bust out the offense that looks like what he had at Alabama. And what if he starts recruiting like that and he has a 2020 Alabama-like offense at Texas? That's why I think there's a little bit more of this, like, well, we don't feel like he has maxed that out yet. Whereas obviously Oklahoma fans would disagree, and they would say it was just a one-off. That was just a fluky year where it all came together.
Right.
Speaking of Alabama, we got an Alabama fan here from Evan Steiner, who says, I think Texas will be more successful than Oklahoma. Deeper pockets go a long way. Oklahoma's pockets are pretty deep. I think they're pretty deep too. And they spend on other sports as well. The notion that they won't necessarily they won't necessarily be able to come over the top and spend on NIL stuff. I don't know, man.
Happened to us.
Right? Dominic Williams ring a bell?
Yeah.
They could spend.
Can't tell me an LSU fan this. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. So I don't know that the money so much is something that's going to sway me, just because there are counterpoints to that. I mean, if we want to really hit home here, Texas A&M is the ultimate. You can't just have money discussion. Money doesn't, buy total happiness when it comes to college football. It just doesn't. So I don't know that the deeper pockets argument can be it for me. It certainly could be part of it. But if we're just talking about straight cash, homie, I can't just say that Texas is. That gets said a lot in our house, Will. Like a surprising amount. And not just from me and not just from Rudy, but Lauren says it a fair amount as well. Straight cash, homie, is just a good way to end any sentence.
Yeah, that's facts. And I think we're kind of hitting on it too, which is that, money in NIL matters more than it ever has. But again, ask Miami and Texas A&M. You still got to run the plays and kneel the football. But I will say, it comes down to leadership, and I think the ability to have the leadership who can activate that. So nothing new here, but I do think the money part of it is. I don't think it. To your point though, it's like if Oklahoma was really backed into a corner, like if Texas was just like, all right, we're going to pay Brent Venables $20 million to come be our DC. Like, I think they could find a way to figure it out,
The Schloss poaching certainly enhances the argument that Texas just has more money than God. Although, you know what? It wasn't like they came over the top and made that crazy of an offer.
That guy just did not want to be a Texas A&M. Is the story here?
That's really what this comes down to, more so than Texas is just going to write people blank checks and not have to worry about,
because their baseball stadium is not good. Like, that's what goes underrated in this whole thing is like it's got like AstroTurf. Yeah. So let's take one of the Lamborghinis back to the dealership. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. Let's end with this one from Bob Ward 7000. Bob says Oklahoma is built for SEC football. Texas will get there eventually, but we'll have a couple of 6-6 seasons ahead of them. Buddy, if Texas goes 6-6 against this schedule with this proven talent, we're having wildly different discussions. The notion of Oklahoma being ready for SEC football is going to continue to be a thing until they eventually get to that place where they are in the preseason national championship discussion. I think Oklahoma fans would tell you they are not in the preseason national championship discussion. If you are ready for the SEC, you are ready to compete for a national championship. Those two things are synonymous with one another. And I know Oklahoma fans will push back on that question, but that is why it's being discussed that way. And until you actually can emerge from the SEC, a conference that has had its champion, the SEC champion, has played in a national championship game. What is it now? Since 2006. Let me do some quick math. 16 out of the last 18 seasons. That has happened. Okay. Until you can emerge and do that, that is why we will always relate those two things. Okay. We don't hate you, Oklahoma fans, but we just asked that question because you're not at that preseason national championship contender level just yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that It's interesting, right? Because as I start to think about this, it's like Venables does give me kind of like that, almost like and like hear me out here because I know the vibe on these guys isn't great now, but really think about what they did. Like almost like Rick or like a early Les Miles, where it's like I feel like you're gonna sit around 9 or 10 wins, but the years that you have it, like you really have it. You know what I'm saying? Like you're gonna like the floor. I feel is a little bit sounds insane to say this out loud, but with the way that, especially like losing Bo Davis and like the ability to just turn anything into diamonds on the interior, I think that the brand of football that Oklahoma is building for could be more recession proof. Like they could be less susceptible to a 5-7 season going forward once they get their guys in, just because so much of what Sark does is based on, yeah, their line play, their D line play, but the receivers, skill positions, quarterbacks, that type of stuff. And I mean, Dylan Gabriel did great things last year too. I'm not taking that away. But when you're a defensive head coach, you just don't take as many risks. And I think that that's something that pretty consistently, like with these two, the variance is going to be a lot higher for Texas. And I think that if you're Oklahoma, yeah, you're used to winning 11 games a year and getting smacked by SEC teams in the title game. But what if you've been playing SEC teams the entire time? That's what you got to remember. So, yeah, it might be disappointing to think like, wow, your winning percentage is, not even close to what Stoops or Riley's was. But I think the ability to just not embarrass yourself and be 8, 9, 10 wins, and then when you have the magic, you can go out and win a playoff game. I can kind of see where they're going with there.
I have these teams going a combined, let me think. Let me do some quick math here. 21-3 in the regular season. So I'm extremely high on both. Okay.
Yeah.
I am. I have Texas going 12-0 in the regular season, getting to the SEC championship. I have Oklahoma going 9-3 and being part of that playoff discussion.
Right.
So when we say which team is built now for it, I'd look at those two things and say, well, they're both kind of built for it. And if they do those things that I'm projecting, then both will live up to my expectations. Both will exceed those expectations. It's going to be interesting beyond. And if we just looked at it for the rest of the decade, I'm sure this conversation could change 2 or 3 different times over the course of the next 5 years, where we feel like we have it figured out and then they go in opposite directions. That stuff happens. It just kind of does. So I won't necessarily say that there is a definitive answer, even if I do think that Texas is more built for the SEC in year one.
Right.
But do we like, and this discussion is for pitch me. So I think we have to decide between those first 2 pitches. I thought I was originally going to go with the first one, but I think outside of the Sark ain't it part from B. Horton 9, I kind of think I like that pitch a little bit more, of the side-by-side year 1 to year 2 comps and remembering what Venables inherited and the recruiting stuff. There's a little bit more nuance to that, with the exception of saying Sark ain't it.
I fully agree with you. I came in thinking that number 1 was going to win in a runaway, but then I feel like I didn't really like because we're splitting hairs, so they're both great pitches, but the first one I feel like I didn't really learn anything necessarily, whereas the second one, I'm like, damn, this guy's actually really making, like, he really did kind of convince me. I'm like, wow, the recruiting has been better, the records have been better, head to head, like, okay, like I this is what a pitch is actually kind of supposed to look like. And he came in, I was joking about the amount of words without me being mad at something. He came in off rip hot, just dumping on Sark. And the fact he was able to turn that around within the context of this pitch is actually really impressive.
Yeah, you convinced a pro Sark guy that a pitch with the words "Sark ain't it" is our.
Oh, you today. Easily Sark ain't it. To come back from that is nuts, actually.
Some would say that you started with a poop sandwich and turned it into the best pitch that we heard today.
That's going to be your new thing. I'll give a straight cash Hobie. Just like, got a straight poop sandwich today. I don't know what's going on.
Will, how's your day going? Well, it started with a poop sandwich and just kind of had to work my way through it. And you know what? Just made the best of it. We're
like this pitch, though, to your point, started with a poop sandwich, ended up with gravy.
Exactly. We're going to have a lot of Texas and Oklahoma coverage from SEC Media Days. That's what our guy Derek Peterson is going to be doing for us. So if you're looking for more of that, you're a Texas and Oklahoma fan, I always tell people, just bookmark SaturdayDownSouth.com. Just add that to your rotation. And I promise you will not be disappointed. So much great coverage that we're going to be doing coming down the pipeline. Got some potential things in the works for the season that we're figuring out that we're going to be doing with them. But if you're an SEC fan and you're kind of sick of talking about them, I would say just kind of embrace it, embrace the new, embrace this new world of college football that we are living in the SEC. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.